During that same year, they released The Rescuers, the first film the studio released without Walt being involved whatsoever. It's about Miss Bianca, the Hungarian representative of the Rescue Aid Society, and Bernard, the janitor of her group. They were assigned to rescue a little orphan called Penny because she got kidnapped by Madame Medusa, who was intended to use her to find a diamond called the Devil's Eye. So it's up to the two mites to save both Penny and the diamond. It's said that this is one of the last films that the 9 old men would do the animation. One noteworthy animator who did this film was Don Bluth. He was credited as the first new animator to become directing animator, since he was only an assistant animator before The Rescuers. Later on, he quit so he could make his own studio, and the rest was animation history. Other animators who would later become big were Glen Keane, Ron Clemens, and Joe Hale. What did they do later on? You'll find out soon. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, 2 of the 9 old men, say that this is the best film without Walt because it was the return to a film they did with heart. Originally, a pigeon was supposed to be Bianca and Bernard's transporter, but then Frank Thomas remembered in the True Life Adventure series about albatrosses and their clumsy takeoffs and landings. So, they made Orville an albatross. Hey, speaking of Orville, he was voiced by radio star Jim Jordan, which was his last role before his death. On its release of 1977, it broke the record for the largest financial amount made for an animated film on opening weekend, earning $48 million. It kept the record until An American Tail broke it. Thanks, Dawn. The critics praised the film, and it was nominated for an Oscar for the song Someone's Waiting for You. There was a major controversy, and it's still going on today, that in one frame, we see a topless woman in the background of the VHS release on January 8, 1999. Disney announced a recall of around 3.4 million VHSs, and later on, they edited out on any videos and DVDs that came out after that. After that, there was The Fox and the Hound. It's about a fox named Todd, who's the best friend of Copper, a hunting dog. What they don't know is that they were supposed to be enemies in the first place. The story was loosely based on Daniel Mannix' 1967 novel of the same name. I say loosely because in the novel, it was way more realistic. It was about the life and death of Todd, and Copper and his master were the main antagonist. Oh, and the animals didn't talk. When production began in 1977, the beginning of the animation was done by the 9 old men, but at the end of production, the newer animators completed the rest. It was the last time that 2 of the 9 old men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, ever animated for a Disney film. Also during the beginning of production, now I know I already talked about Don Bluth, right? Well, when he left, along with 11 other animators, the production for The Fox and the Hound was delayed. Not only that it was to make Don's own studio, it was also because Disney was at their second dark age and they hoped to make films like Disney did during their golden age. Like The Rescuers, there were some new animators that would later become big stars. There were ones I said in The Rescuers, but also there were people like Brad Bird, John Musker, Gary Goldman, John Pomeroy, and the most surprising of the bunch, Tim Burton? When it was released in 1981, it was a financial success, but the reviews were mixed. People like film historian Leonard Martin didn't really like it, but then there's Time magazine and film critic Roger Ebert who praised it. 2 years later, the 25th Disney film came out named The Black Cauldron, based on the Chronicles of Prydain book series by Lloyd Alexander. It's about Taran, a pig keeper, who finds a black cauldron, no surprise here. He and his friends, Princess Eilonwy, Fluter Flam, and a thing called Gurgi? How the heck do you pronounce these names? Anyways, they tried to destroy it, But then the Horn King took it and unleashed his power. Now Taran has to defeat the Horn King to save the world. In the beginning of production, in 1971 to be precise, some of the veteran animators and writers took a stab at making the film and doing a little stuff. Even Don Bluth and Tim Burton worked on it a bit. Then everything changed when Joe Hale was named producer in 1980, and boy did he change the production. He rewrote the script, and he made the Horn King the main villain of the film. Before Joe, he was only a minor character. This film was marked for being the first for a lot of things. The first Disney film to get a PG rating, the first to be widescreen since Sleeping Beauty, the first to have closing credits since Alice in Wonderland, the first to use the APT process instead of xerography, and the first to have computer graphics. That APT process and the computers played a big role to complete the film, since they enhanced the quality and the settings of the animation. Now, you know that it's rated PG for being a little dark, right? Well, trust me, it was worse. They had to re-edit it twice to make sure it didn't get a PG-13 or R rating, because some scenes were pretty violent, and one of them had partial nudity from the princess. When it was released 12 years after production began, it was
a failure.
It only earned half of what the budget was, and it had mixed reviews. On the bright side, it had a cult following, and it won a Special Academy Award to David W. Spencer for his development on the APT process. But things would probably get a little better with the release of The Great Mouse Detective, based on the Basil of Baker Street book series by Eve Titus. It's the story of Basil, who has to find a toy maker named Flaversham because he got kidnapped by Ratigan to make a robot replica of the Queen. On the re-release, they changed the title into The Adventures of the Great Mouse Detective, and in some countries, they changed it to Basil the Great Mouse Detective, because sometimes, titles just don't have enough words on it. For production, it took 4 years of story development, but it took more than 1 year to do the animation with 125 artists involved. In the book, Basil was inspired and named after Basil Rathbone. You may remember him as one of the narrators in The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, since he's more known to play Sherlock Holmes a lot. Horror movie star Vincent Price said that his favorite role he played was Professor Ratigan, the main villain of the film. One reason was because there were 2 original songs written for him. I understand The World's Greatest Criminal Mind, but what was the other one?
Goodbye, so soon.
I guess, since he's singing it. During the recording, Price would make some weird exaggerated Shakespearean gestures. So, the animators decided to sketch it and make it as poses for Ratigan. Monty Python member John Cleese was the original choice to do the voice of Basil, but now it's played by Barry Ingham. A notable scene is Basil and Ratigan's final battle on Big Ben, because it's known for the early use of CGI. Every mechanical part of Big Ben, the background, even Big Ben itself, was all made by computer for that scene. Some people say that this is the first Disney film to use computer animation, but we all know by now it's The Black Cauldron. See how unpopular this film is? On its 1986 release, it did okay with $25 million in the box office, but it would have gotten more if it weren't for another mouse who stole its thunder. Remember An American Tail's new record? Well, a few months after The Great Mouse Detective, that's when it happened, and boy did they outdraw Disney. Well, at least it got good ratings and it wasn't a flop like The Black Cauldron.